trust is really important. The trusted team. You've got to trust people to do their job. The exuberance of the youth of wanting to really get into it is really overpowering sometimes. Take a step back, think, understand the company you're going for, but you make sure it's you, because it's you that people want.
The only thing that CEO was looking for is how that person treated the waiting staff.
People will deliver if you treat them the right way, I think, and that's the important part. I think that's a really fundamental part of any business. Treat people as you want to be treated. Never burn a bridge is another lesson in this life. Never burn a bridge, because you wish them well. You know, your network is really important, and that's why don't burn bridges, because the world's a village.
Hello. We're exploring the intersection of sports, media and cutting-edge technology with Matthew Baxter, a visionary leader who's reshaped industries from football to blockchain. As co-founder of Stellwagen Ventures and Tokens Commerce, Matthew bridges the gap between global entertainment franchises and next-gen fan engagement. We'll dive into his tenure as Executive Board Director and Chief Media Officer at Liverpool Football Club, where he redefined sports media strategy, and his leadership as President of DugOut, now part of OneFootball, a digital sports content giant with over 2 decades steering brands like Disney, Warner Bros. And MGM. Matthew brings unparalleled insights into global distribution, brand monetization, and the rise of NFTs in music and sport. So whether you're curious about blockchain's role in fan communities or how to navigate the evolving media landscape, this conversation promises to unpack strategies for winning in business through people. So welcome to Talent Talks, Matthew.
Well, thanks for the intro. Visionary, I'm not sure about that. They're very nice, very complimentary, but I'll take it. But I'm not sure about visionary. I think they're just adapting to the market as they go. The market's changing our worlds, don't they, Dan?
They do, and you've got to be a visionary to adapt. So there you go. Right, let's get straight into it, because there's a lot of things that people are going to be interested in and a lot of things that people can learn. Sure. So we start, as you know, the podcast with the same question. So what are your experiences of hiring, being hired, and what are your key lessons learned?
With that beginning question, you could probably spend the whole podcast talking about, if I'm honest. It's interesting when you say the experiences of being hired and hiring. The journey from the beginning, when you're starting out, to what you learn in your career to this point is long, and you have to adapt and be nimble, I think, in every situation you're in, whether you're hiring or being hired. And I think the most important thing I wanted to talk to you about today was it's about people, and importantly, cultural fit. You know, when you look at those things, they're very easy to say, but actually that's the piece that drives businesses forward. People are the people who do that, whatever skill base they've got, whatever level. If you're an intern or you're a CEO and everyone else in or a chairman, those people are the driving force of any business. And I think when you're a business owner, so if you look at it where I am today at Stellwagen Ventures as a business owner, or even as my responsibility as the president of DugOut, you've got responsibility to investors and people in the board. And you are really looking how to have a trusted team around you. Trust is really important. The trusted team, you've got to trust people to do their job. People have skill bases to do so. You've got to pick up the trust. But I think for me, the overriding thing is people and staying true to your core values. And if your core values and how you are defined as a person and what drives you as an individual, if you can have that fit culturally is really, really important. So, you know, when you start out, I mean, I'm going back to the early 90s, so it's a little bit of a long time ago. So the grey hair probably shows it. But, you know, when you're starting out, it's busy out there. There's a lot of people. How do you differentiate yourselves in the market? You know, when you started out, I started out in the film and TV industry, and how do you differentiate? It's about learning on the job and learning how you go. And I think it's really important when you're starting out as a person going for a job to understand the business you're going into. What is it that they do? What is it they're about? How are they? What are they trying to achieve? What have they done? What's the company you're going to be to interview for? What have they done in their life cycle? Where do you think they're going? Understand that business. You're hungry to get on the employment ladder. You're hungry for a job, and you know, the exuberance of the youth of wanting to really get into it is really overpowering sometimes. Take a step back, think, understand the company you're going for. But importantly, when you are in that situation, is make sure you've understand who the person is that you're sitting opposite. What are they about? What do they want? What do they want from me? The cultural fit thing is important. And I think you've had it in lots of your podcasts, and I'd like to reiterate it from some of the other people in your podcast. Have questions to ask, but the questions have to relate to the work you've done about the business. Yeah. So, for example, even last week I was interviewing an intern for Stellwagen, and he was brilliant. So he's now an intern. And he asked me some pretty demanding questions, but it was all about what our business is doing. And he'd researched it, he'd understood my business, and he understood what we were trying to do. And he wanted to know about the involvement. I thought, he made me feel slightly uncomfortable, but in a very good way.
Yeah.
Because you think, crikey, he understands the business. It's not about, what is my job going to be every day of the week? It's about, look, I can see you in sport, music, media, entertainment, and blockchain. Can it relate to other industries, and can it do this, and this? And I thought that was really telling. So that was one question. So understand what the business is you're going to is about, and have those questions, but make them really driven. I think, when you look at my career in terms of being an interviewer or interviewer, there are different types of interviews, aren't there? So, for example, when I was asked to become part of the Fenway Liverpool setup, it was a really interesting interview process. It was more like do a piece of work, come and see us in Boston, spend a week with us, hang out with us. I met all the board of Fenway. If you added them all up, it's 27 interviews, but I didn't see it as such. It was just, they wanted to see if I was culturally right for them. So I was very privileged and honoured to go to John Henry's house with Tom Werner, the chairman, and Ed Weiss, who's sort of the legal counsel of Fenway, and Sean McGrail, who runs Nesson, the media business. And we spent time, and we watched a Liverpool game at his house. We had dinner. It was really, and I think they were. When you look back at that, what were they doing? They were culturally seeing if I was the right, as well as could I deliver for them? Was I the right person we could be on the phone every day? And when you look back at that period, I said probably taking that forward in my career in terms of cultural fit. You come back into Liverpool, and I spent 3 or 4 days with Ian Eyre, lovely guy, CEO at the time, and I went to a game with him. I think it was Wigan around Christmas time. It was really about that fit between us. So when I look at how do I take that forward? When I've had interviews with people, I've sort of made sure that how can they come and spend time with us? Because 40 minutes, an hour, it's sometimes so difficult. You've got to really trust your gut as well. Your gut, even if you're the interviewee, you've got your gut says, is this business right for me? Yeah. It's the same regard. If you're the interviewer, is this right for me? Is this right for the job? So spending time with people is important. And I think I've learned that if you spend and invest that time in that person as you go through the process, people used to say, I had 3 or 4 interviews. It's not that. It's more soft than that. It's about come and spend some time with us, come around the office, come and have a coffee, let's go to lunch, because ultimately I want to trust that person to be the custodian of their seat. They're sitting in there, that role, to do a good job, and they feel trusted and empowered by the employer to do the job they're coming to do. Yeah. Because we've all got stuff in our inbox. I need you to do a job for me. Can you do it? And can I trust you to do it? It's not easy, and no one ever gets it fully right. But you have to learn on the job, and the environment changes out here. It's very dynamically different, and how those roles change in the interview process in the early 90s to what it is today is totally different. And I would say when you're the interviewer and you're looking for talent, spend time to understand that person. They're investing their time and want to come have a role with you. Understand their CV, understand what they've done, understand where they've come from. Dossier is a bit of a rich word, but have an understanding of where they've come from or what they want to do and where do I think they want to go? Because they're on a journey. We're all on a journey. What's their journey? What are they trying to do with their life? Where do they want to go? How can we help? Yeah. And how they can help us? How can we help them? I'll give you one funny story. Not really, but funny. Okay, well, this girl I interviewed a while back, and this shows the power of making sure your CV is right and you're true to your own CV. I was going to hire her. I was absolutely going to hire her. She was a firecracker. She was brilliant, and I thought this is such a good cultural fit. And at the end, on her little to do her sort of personal stuff, it said excellent non-smoker. And I asked her, just out of interest, my last question, she goes, yeah, what's an excellent non-smoker? And she completely fell apart. I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, you've put excellent non-smoker on your CV. Well, and she went into this whole thing, how she was addicted, and she started crying. And it was very challenging. She said, do you know what? I can't do this. And she left, and that was that. But 3 minutes before that, I would have hired her.
Yeah.
So it was a really strange thing she put on her CV that obviously triggered something in her that basically she triggered something and she left. And I followed up with her and said, are you okay? She said, yes, I'm really sorry about that. I'm not in a very good place at the moment. So be true to your CV.
It's really interesting. And I don't know how to follow on from that, because you say being true to your CV, and we won't get into it now, potentially later in the podcast, but there's so many challenges about staying true to a CV when you're not necessarily writing your own CV, and obviously the AI piece of that. But that's actually, when you said that story, that's where my head went, in terms of, is there something in there that's been written by somebody else that she didn't realise, and that's why she's kind of like fallen apart. But I don't know. But I think that the key part of what you're saying there is, for me, is the time and the cultural fit piece, because personal stories around jobs that I've had where I've had the fewest amount of interviews have always turned out the worst. And I won't go into detail on that one, but I think it's really interesting to hear when you've been out. Fenway is the perfect example, being out for a week, because they know you can do the job. That's not what they're testing. They're testing whether they trust you to do the job. It's the trust to act in the way they want you to whilst you're doing that job. And I think that's absolutely critical, and that's the kind of really key piece of what we are, I suppose, trying to accomplish from the interview process, which I don't think is given enough thought at the moment. You do get those instances, especially at senior level. That's a little bit different, because you do get that, and you do have that ability to spend a little bit more time with people, get people over to the right locations. But I think there is an element of there being a bit of a disconnect between what the interview process is and actually what you want from that person doing the job. And it is, you mentioned about there being a huge change from when you were from the early 90s to now. How have you seen that from your perspective? Is that a positive? Is that a negative? Like, what's the kind of overarching trend, I suppose?
I think it's a good thing. I think with you talk about people writing CVs and AI and everything like that. Just if you are going to use those tools, which an AI is going to be great, there are things that need to be sorted, fine. But AI in any industry is going to help everyone grow. Yeah. So if AI writes your CV or writes your cover letter, make sure you read it and understand it. And there's a little, I'm not saying that lady had it, but you just make sure it's in your tone of voice. Mm-hmm. You make sure it's you, because it's you that people want. And it's funny, when I'm just listening to you then, I'm thinking, the word interview is quite a strong word, isn't it? It's like, we can have a meeting and let's have a chat about the role. It's a much softer way, but it's an interview. It's a pressure cooker. It's a bit like going to an A-level exam or your finals in your degree, right? That's a pressure cooker environment. And lots of people just listen to you then. Did I really like doing exams? Not really. That wasn't my thing. It just didn't, so people are very different. So just putting everyone into an interview box is quite a pressured environment. Yeah. So just thinking what you were just listening to you just then, an important word to say is listening to people as well is really important. Listening to you then, it's like interviews are quite a hard word, isn't it? And I think it has changed, because when I was much younger, you are going to interviews and it is a pressure cooker and it is in that environment, and you're naturally putting not everyone's like, I always put myself under my own pressure to do that, to perform. And you're thinking, whether you're doing a speech at a sports conference or a TV conference, that you put yourself under pressure. Some people are more natural than others, and this is the same in an interview. And I do think now, where we are today, I think there is more resonance to that sort of cultural fit, listening, understanding people, whereas it was, dare I say, more transactional before. Interview, job, yes, I think they can do it. Dan, you're in, come and do job, thanks very much. I think there is a development, definitely definitely, I think maybe as you get older, you understand those things a bit better from both sides of the fence. But I definitely think that the values, the culture, the people, and understanding the other person on the other side of the table rather than it being so transactional is definitely changed, I think.
Yeah, and I've said this on the podcast a number of times as well, and I feel like I repeat myself, but there's that always a story, and I still can't remember who it was, I should really look it up, but of the final interview being the CEO taking that person for dinner. And the only thing that CEO was looking for is how that person treated the waiting staff.
Yeah.
If they were rude to the waiting staff, or if they're kind of dismissive of whatever it is, wouldn't get the job. No matter how well they did in the previous interviews, no matter how like suited to the job role they were, that was the thing that he was looking for. And I think
that's how you treat people.
It's
how you
exactly.
treat people.
How you treat the
important.
receptionists as you walk in the building, etc.
One of my original bosses at Fox back in the day, you know, he was definitely looking for that cult. He didn't mention culture, but he definitely looked at it. You know, everybody has a role in a business. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do or where you come from. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's making their own journey, and it doesn't matter who it is in the building, whether it's, you know, I mean, in Liverpool, right? I mean, the people who are serving the meals to the players, I mean, they've been there for donkey's years, and they're lovely. And they're so the stuff they've seen is more than anyone else. Yeah. And the stories they tell, and but a bit of time. Can I have a cup of coffee with me and have a bit of time? And then you're talking to me, the CEO, and then the next minute you're talking to Tom Werner on the phone, Jim. And it's just, people will deliver if you treat them the right way, I think. And that's the important part. I think that's a really fundamental part of any business. Treat people as you want to be treated.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so taking that concept, and I saw a stat this week, in fact, that 75% of M&A fails due to cultural fit and due to people. It's obviously something that you're integrally involved in at the moment. So how do you, from an investment perspective, take a look at that and look at, right, this is the business idea, but actually how much emphasis is the people and the cultural fit compared to actually the seed of the next?
Good question.
Nvidia or Apple, or
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, again, it's crucial. Is the answer. I think the short answer is crucial. If you think about, so if you look at Stellwagen today, music, sport, media, entertainment, helping businesses raise capital. These people are seed Series A businesses, and they've got great ideas and great concepts, and they need some help raising capital. If you're an investor, whether it's 50K or 5 million or 50 million, you're investing in a business. You're investing in the concept of the business. I mean, the concept of, take DugOut. Let me just go back a step. Take DugOut at the beginning. DugOut on the launch period of November 2016, the product we had then and the one that was sold to OneFootball was very, very different.
Yeah.
And that journey. So what are the investors doing? They're investing originally in the product and the person and the people, because you're spending, I'm going to put money on the table. I want to know that you're going to look after my money and make it grow to X for the return, but also the product's going to be right and we're going to come together on the journey. That is absolutely fundamentally critical, because if I'm investing in you, I need you to look after my money and grow it. And when you're talking at that level, that's really important, the product and the person. But then you go up a bit into big organizations are taking over. So if you look at DugOut being taken over and being sold to OneFootball, we'd spent, candidly speaking, blood, sweat and tears and energy and, long days and long nights building that business. Fun that it was great fun. It was enjoyable. It was hard. It was challenging. It was all those things. And, when Elliot, the chairman, and the team sold it to OneFootball, you kind of want to make sure that your baby child's energy doesn't just diminish to nothing. We've seen it so many times, the story is old as time, when people take business and they disappear. I mean, I remember when I was younger, Friends Reunited, if you remember that, was taken over by ITV. Where is that today, and things like that. So it's sad. But so I'm very pleased when I think about the team who are now at OneFootball and where that's gone and where the delivery is, that there's a little piece of me in OneFootball, although I didn't work for OneFootball at the time, that's carried on. And I think that cultural fit and takeover and the journey continues. It's a nice thing. So that again comes to not only about people, it comes to organisation and investor cultural fit. are they the right? So if you look at what we had at DugOut in terms of the content, the teams, the backing, the shareholders, and they had some live, they had the platform, it took it to the next level. It was a nice fit. Kudos to the people, the chairman and everyone else who did that to finalize that deal. But it's nice to see it keep going.
Yeah. So the question then becomes, have you invested in or hired anyone or anything that hasn't had that alignment of a cultural fit, or hasn't had that? You mentioned in the first answer around the core value side of things from your perspective. Have you gone outside of that at any point because you just thought this is something that's too good to miss? And if so, what has been the impact of that, if that is...
Sorry, if I've missed something in the investment, you mean? Or
yeah, no, as in from a kind of cultural and people perspective, you've got your core values that you hold.
Definitely.
And from investment perspective, you have the thesis and you've got the cultural elements that you look for. Have you ever gone outside of those because there is just something that's either too good to miss in that person that you think needs to be hired, or equally the business that needs to be invested in?
I'm quite principled in the fact that I'm just to my core values. I think the example would be, when I work on, Jeff Walker, my business partner with Stellwagen, he's based in the US, and it's kind of answering your question, I think, is, we had a nice, we sell music royalties to private equity, and we also are in the process of raising the fund to buy our own music royalties. And interestingly, on the sort of journey we're on in that space and becoming, well known in that space for that royalty stream and that asset class, our principles are such that when we had a producer deal on the table a few years ago, really fabulous producer, lovely, fabulous producer, great content, music content, and we were looking for the right investment, right people, and what happened was we were involved with the team and some elements around it that were just not core to our principle. So we politely extricated ourselves from that process. Never burn a bridge is another lesson in this life. Never burn a bridge, because we wish them well on their journey and what they wanted to do, and let's have a coffee. Jeff has had a coffee with them subsequently in Los Angeles. And they've done their transaction without us, but their values didn't align with ours. So, you trust, when you're old enough, you trust your gut. Yeah. And the gut, we got off that phone call. Jeff and I called each other a lot, obviously, and called straight away and said, this isn't right, is it? We said, no. So we just pulled away. So if that answers your question, I think we're very principled in our values. And I think you have to stay true to them. When you're looking at hiring people, that has to play out, because otherwise you're going to end up jarring with that person all the whole time. And I think when you've got to be a team, and I think that's important. I think, if you look at things like, also things like succession planning, it's a really strong implication within businesses. Through my career, whether it's studios, Liverpool or DugOut, when you're looking at succession planning, it's quite a tough scenario. For people, I want to talk to you about succession planning. Well, I'll find them a job, thanks. But there's a way you can do it, because actually, if you're suddenly, Dan, you suddenly leave because you want to go and do another job on your journey, you've got to think about, right, who do we need to fill that hole? Because that's kind of as seamless as possible. Because you know what it's like, you're in this business, you could be 6, 8, 10 months trying to find the right candidate. Crikey, what happens in that interim period? It can leave a little bit of a problem and a bit of a gap and upset and gossip and all that. You just don't need that. So I think when you're looking at those things, succession planning is also important in that process. And then by doing that, the values of those people, what you want, and you follow it through. So those things are really important. But yeah, I think principle and staying core to your culture. I mean, if you're a CEO of a business, everyone talks about it all the time. It's like that culture percolates down, all the way through. And I think that is true. It really, really does. And, I think also the important thing is, how do you get that culture to percolate up as well? So take George, who's our manager now. I mean, George left Winchester University and done a sports degree. And when we're talking about this process the whole time, it's interesting because, again, he's on his journey after university. I mean, I feel sorry for that age group who went through the COVID universities.
Yeah.
Just awful, awful. And I think more so us as older people, generation, need to lean into those guys a little bit more because, you know, working from home, working remote after COVID, they were in, their university rooms, they weren't allowed out. A terrible time for those guys, a really hard journey because I learned, you learned, we learned by being in an office around people and asking questions, listening and asking questions. Really important trait, ask questions all the time. So George left university, he's like, how do I get into this industry I want to get to? And so leads me to another point I wanted to raise with you this morning, Dan, was, you know, your network is really important, and that's why don't burn bridges, because the world's a village. Yeah. And we've just had a coffee around the corner. I've just bumped into someone I haven't seen for 15 years. Yeah. And that's really, really critical. So he looked at his network of people from university and found his way and heard about Stellwagen. And not only did he didn't just go, give us an intern job. He understood what we were trying to achieve in sport. You know, we transact clubs, for example. We help emerging sports grow on and off pitch. So whether that's frisbee or women's cricket, or whether we transacting a football club, multi-purpose football club, or whatever it may be, you know, he knew that. And he wrote a piece of an article about an English multi-sport club and said, look, this club does this. If they do this, this could be a very good piece of business and a good transactional business. He was speculating, but it was true. But he understood the value of our business and said, look, I've written 2 pages of A4 on just a thesis about what your business does and how it could relate to this club. It was a club he likes and et cetera, et cetera. It was nice. It was a passion point, but he'd done the extra. Yeah. So we said, okay, come be an intern. And this is the cultural fit of kind of, I don't want to say try before you buy, but try before you buy, right? So he came on to be an intern for 3 months, and 5 years later, he's now our manager. He runs the intern program. He runs other people. He's brilliant. George is fabulous. He looks after all the sort of the investment pieces. He's really good, and he's really grown with us. And he's part of our furniture. Yeah, yeah. But he himself, because he's a young generation, impacts our culture, age up and learning up, because social media, AI, the world he lives in is a different brain space. I need his brain space. Yeah. I need his expertise to help me where my blind spots or my weak spots are, because that's important. And I think that to and fro is really important.
Yeah, I think the exposure to different levels of experience, expertise, but culture and knowledge base as well. One of the podcasts in the first series with a guy called Brendan Keegan, who's a US CEO of a car company, and he purposely brings basically someone from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s onto the management board effectively, because then it can go, right, okay, well, you're relevant to this audience, you're relevant to this audience over here, and you're relevant to this audience over here. So you get that range of experience bases that can help on that front. Going back to the example you said with George, I think, and you said it in the first answer as well, understanding the business and the area that you want to go into as a junior, whether that's coming from university, whether that's first, second, third.
Yep.
This doesn't actually go back on that. I don't think this changes in any way, shape or form. You have to understand the organization that you're applying for. I think the challenge we have at the moment is that we are not in a good jobs market. And so you have a lot of people that have either been made redundant for economic reasons from the company that they used to be at, or are coming into the job market, and you're now going to get the next wave of those students that are about to graduate over the next few months that are coming into the job market as well. And hopefully the economy will pick up before that happens, but we never know where we are at the moment. And so you've got people that are just there getting more and more frustrated, longer and longer without roles, and are therefore then just applying for anything and everything that comes along. So you then have that that then puts more time and effort on the organization's perspective, because they've got to go through 300, 400, 500, 600 CVs, however many it is, And so you have this challenge of, well, I'm just going to apply to anything and everything that looks interesting, versus that approach of, right, I'm going to utilize who I know, what I might know, I'm going to do the work behind it. And I think that lesson there, I think, is so important to just do the work behind an application, because even if you do end up going through to interview and you haven't done it, you get found out pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, I mean, you pick, there's 2 or 3 or 4 points in there which are really valid. What I would say to people in the jobs market anywhere is, don't give up.
Yeah.
Do not give up. It's really tough out there. It's tough for everyone. It's tough running a business. It's tough growing a business. Be nimble, be flexible. Don't give up. It's really hard, and I'm sure there's moments in everyone's life where it's like, oh, really, come on. Just don't give up. But the point about the preparation is everything. It's when I get that opportunity, that one opportunity, be ready.
Yeah.
Prepare. And if you've done the work on the organisation, you know your CV, you've read it, you know what's going on, you know the organisation, you know the person who's interviewing you, you know where the job is, you know what you want to achieve, you know what, you are also, you're hungry, and don't be desperate, because it comes across, but which is a hard thing. You really want that job. But do that through knowledge and asking questions and listening and all those kind of things, because then you're fully prepared and understand where you want to be, because that one opportunity comes. It's a bit like a striker or a forward in football, right? It might be a really dull 0-0 World Cup final draw, and it's the 89th minute and the ball gets lobbed in and you've got one chance to stick it in the back of the net. All that preparation, fitness work, psychology, health and wellness, fitness sprints, bleep tests, everything they've done is for that 1 minute. And they stick it in the back of the net, World Cup gets lifted. It's like, everyone talks about small margins. All that hard work you do, you get over the line, you win the gold medal, whatever it may be. And I think it's the same in an interview, because it's really tough out there, make no mistake. But if you're prepared and you do the work and put the work in, it's noticed, and that's how you'll stand out in an interview. And then, how do you make your CV stand out? What's different about you? So, when George wrote me this letter about, this piece about this sports club, it stood out.
Yeah.
And how do you differentiate yourself from the crowd is really, really important. And and when you think about what you were saying about the market and everything going and the economy and stuff like that, the market does ebb and flow, and people do move, and people do move on. Spaces do create, people do grow. When economies do grow, people creates more opportunity. And then there are things that, if you can utilise, that's something has changed, I think, over the last 20, 30 years, is, get a job, fight for a job. It is kind of who you know and how you know.
Yeah.
But if you don't know people in the place you want to work in, how do you find the time to make it in? So, I think I was listening to, it might have even been one of your podcasts, it must be 6-8 months ago, about someone who just said, look, can I just take you for a coffee? I really love your company, and this is your company, this is what it does, and I just want your advice. Can I please take you for a coffee? And this lady took this, agreed, 30 minutes, coffee. The worst thing, I think, it was a podcast, and said, the worst it's going to cost you, I'll buy you a coffee, it's 30 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
I know time is precious, because time is precious, for 30 minutes. And that person got employed because they'd taken the time to try and differentiate themselves for that one opportunity.
Yeah.
So make your opportunities, prepare, and if someone, we have it all the time, people ring us up or send us CVs and stuff like that. And yes, if someone sends a CV, we will go back to that people, even if we're not in the process of hiring. Have you tried speaking to this person? It just shows initiative.
Yeah, and also, it shows kindness to go back to them, which is the other issue from an organisational perspective. But that's a kettle of fish.
Just on that note, I think I know it is a kettle of fish. But that's really, really important. I think that is fundamentally something. The first question you asked me was, "What have you learned?" And how many interviews have I been to Or you're sitting home going, do you think I've got the role? Do you know what? Why I really want it? Do you know? And you hear nothing, and you call them up, and they go, "Hi, yeah, I had the interview last week. Just catching up. Oh, we've employed someone." That is the most crushing feeling in the world. So I will never do that. If you don't get the job, thanks for the interview. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Just to let you know, we've gone another direction, or we've got another person, or we've done something. But look, keep up. We really liked who you were. Keep it going. I think it's just respectful, because I've been on the receiving end. It doesn't feel nice.
And equally, you come back to the network element of it. It's a small world, and
it'll come round.
It'll come round, and I think there's been a lot of kind of chat about how many CVs that people get, and you get 500 CVs. You can't reply to them all, but actually you can, because once you've gone past the screening side of that, there are tools and means and ways just to have, right, I'm really sorry, haven't made it past this one. And
especially if you meet them face to face, you must talk to them.
Yeah.
You must.
But I've had people I've worked with over the last couple of years who've gone down to final stage interviews and never heard anything back. And the next thing they see is the new person that's
a LinkedIn post. They've got it.
Exactly that, and it's and it's just so frustrating from my side. But equally, I think it's a lack of respect. And when it's such a difficult job market, not having any response whatsoever, you're exactly right. You will just go, every email that comes in, or is it that? No, it's not. And then it's natural. It's human nature as you go further and further down into the process to start imagining yourself doing that job, imagining what you're going to be doing. And equally, if you happen to not have a role at the time, imagining the money coming back in as well, which is a critical part of it. And I think it just frustrates me so much when that doesn't happen. And it is just down to a lack of respect.
I think ultimately, people, that the world is a village. It's the people who say it's a hamlet, right? The 6 degrees of separation over 30 years is now 2 degrees of separation, and a lot of these people who are way younger than I am, they could be your boss one day, and I think that's cool. I think that's decent, and I don't mind that. I think that's what you realise is there's some super people out there, and that's why you got to treat people the right way. I think. Because they're the ones who are going to drive the businesses forward and with their vision. I think it's really important. Yeah. So treat people kindly.
Yeah, and I think going back to
however pressured you are with your budgets and your targets and your investors and everything like that, it takes 2 minutes.
Yeah, and it isn't. There are tools and ways and means of doing it. Make it slightly easier, certainly from that screening perspective, more personal as it goes on. But wanted to come back to that network element, and we're in a very connected world now. LinkedIn is the easiest way of effectively connecting with anybody. The story you told there around kind of the coffee element, I think that I've had, what day are we on? Thursday today. I've had probably 5 LinkedIn requests asking to just have a chat this week. And I
thought you were going to say you've had 5 coffees this morning.
No, I'm on 3. So, and I, like this is my role. It's what I enjoy, and they're junior people. I was in their position, so I'm fundamentally happy to have a chat with them. But I also think, and this relates to one of the previous podcasts that came out a couple of weeks ago with Rob Scotland, that his view was don't apply to jobs, just network, and just utilise the time that you would spend applying for jobs, identifying the companies that you might want to work for, 5 people within each of those companies, and understanding how you might be able to take things off that. And I think it's almost a mixture of the two, if I'm being completely honest from my side. But I think the key part of that is identifying people, but then not reaching out and saying, can I just buy you a coffee? Because everyone gets those kind of things. Actually going, okay, I've seen what you've done in this investment, or I've seen what you've done with this activation.
Exactly.
Either having an opinion, so the point that you made about George in terms of his article, of just, actually, I would have done it this way because of these, or did you think about doing this, or have you thought about doing this because of X, Y, and Z? And you'll find that so many more people are going, oh, that's I haven't thought about that, or I did think about that, but we can do it for reasons that person would never have known. It's the confidence about having that opinion as well, and not just kind of thinking, well, I'm not qualified to have that opinion, because this is something I also kind of bang on about quite a lot and say to certainly the more junior candidates, but it is very valuable. valid across the board is everyone has value. You've learned something that
100%.
somebody else isn't going to know, regardless of how experienced you are, how old you are, whatever that might be. And so it's just about articulating that value and understanding how that value might add to somebody at a place that you might want to work. And it might be, right, I'd really love to work at Nike. Nike's huge. How can I find somebody within that organisation that I can go and actually say, right, how do I get into this organisation? More fundamentally, how can I help you in the long term? And therefore, when something does come up, you'll think about me going forward.
Yeah, I think to set a Nike example, Nike's a broad church, right?
Yeah.
Are you manufacturer? Are you distribution? Are you sales? Are you design? Are you product? Are you development? I mean, there are so many aspects to it, right? So understanding what's true to you, and goes back to the preparation point. Are you a communications executive and seeing how you can communicate the new piece, or have you thought about this as a product? I've read about this new material that can create faster running and break the marathon. Where does your skill base lie? And that comes to preparation and approach. And on the receiving end, as a person, as an employer, someone employing someone, he's like, okay, well, they're approaching you with an idea of value. They don't know the nuances of what's in your building.
Yes.
They're trying to show you value. And have the open mind, well, they don't know what they're talking about. That's not fair. That's not right. They're trying to show you that I think this is where I want to. Can I please, here's this new material. Have you thought about this? And, I'm just interested. I would love to come have a chat with you about product development in Nike and et cetera, et cetera. Have you got 5 minutes? I'd love to just talk to you about that. And that's the ways in. It shows preparation. And you can't be doing that 8 hours a day, so don't get disheartened. But I think you're right. It's about the understanding of the process. I mean, how many, again, and you talked about the change in times when you were 90s and into the movie days and stuff like that. It was, you read Broadcast magazine and there was an article in the back with a job advert. You don't anymore?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there are LinkedIn jobs and other stuff, right? But it's easy one. It's a bit sort of one-dimensional a little bit sometimes. But by having that relationship, you're starting to build your network. And that person might look, there's nothing at Nike at the minute, but do you know what? I know they're the competitor, but I've got my mate Dave, he's at Adidas. Have a chat with him because he's quite interested in what you're talking about. I know it's a competitor, but if you look in the movie industry, everyone moves around. So Warner's would talk to MGM talked to Disney talked to Sony talked to Lionsgate. Everyone was friends. Okay, we had product that was different and we had different ways of doing it. You went into the football space. You thought, we can't talk to Man U, you're Liverpool, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I remember putting together with a couple of others the sort of media hub of people. We did it at the Premier League because we're all in the same bucket. We have a different way of doing it, and I'm never going to make you a Liverpool fan if you're a Man U fan, right? Or a United fan, right? So, but together there's a collaboration element. So the industries are villages, they're hamlets, and even if you talk to me, I haven't got something, but do you know what? My mate, he works for New Balance or whoever it is. I can introduce them to have a chat, and that's the network. That's the snowball effect of networking, because you've opened that first door, which can open a second door, which opens a third door, which can hopefully lead to what you want to do. So there's a lot of elements of process you should be thinking about, even in your networking, and how you do it. And it's not. It is about LinkedIn. LinkedIn's important. I mean, LinkedIn's changing itself anyway, but it's more matrixed and dynamic and layered than LinkedIn. But it's a definite way to understand the companies you want to work for, etc., etc. But don't just, it's good to shoot for the Nikes and the Addies and all that at the top, but there is 100 of others out there, who are, Castor's an example, Gymshark's an example, Oxen's an example. These brands, and 10 years ago, were they there? I don't know, probably not, because they're new now because everyone knows about them. But if you go and say, I want to help you on your journey, I can do this, this and this, and I'll come in like George, I'll be an intern, I just want to learn, and I want to show you what my value is, and there's ways to do that. Okay, your journey is, I'd really like to work for Nike one day, but what you might end up doing is you might like those other businesses so much that you're on their journey with them that your Nike journey diminishes a bit because you enjoy the journey you're on over here. So it's about being flexible, agile, nimble, communicative as well. So, and I think, listening to the owners of what they want to do, where they want to go, and what they want to try and achieve, or reading up on what they want to do, because then they'll show you a shape, to your point, what value can I add to your
Yes.
story?
And whether it aligns with your values and where you want to be going from an objectives perspective anyway.
Exactly, because again, it's you're on your journey, so your cultural fit of your own values and your own core need to align with the company you're going to for.
Yeah.
And if they don't align, you're in the wrong place, and that's only won't serve you very well. It won't serve that company very well, and it doesn't work. It will fall flat very quickly. Examples where it's slightly left field. We hired a guy at Liverpool, and he went through the whole interview process. It's not always right. So this is an example of where it doesn't go right. We hired a guy. He's a lovely guy. He went through the process, and we gave him part of the process is to give someone ask someone to do something for you, to show a bit of their work. That's the time factor we talked about earlier in the podcast, right? Time, or show me what you can do. And so we set them all the tasks, these people in the shortlist. Not very much, but just they came back and we hired this guy. And then we went on tour to the US in summer tour, pre-season tour. And I remember he said, "Have you got a minute?" And he'd been there a few weeks, and he went, "Can I just have a hot dog on one of those little stands in the New York street?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He goes, "I'm going to go home." I said, "Okay." He goes, "You know what I realised is my family at home. I'm going to be doing a lot of travelling, and that's not right for me. I need to be at home. I want to be with my family, young kids, and this job is going to be more demanding away from home than I thought. I love the job. I think it's great, but with respect, I need to be true to myself." And that can't come out in an interview process. But I respected him. It was hard. It was hard because we've been through the process. It was hard. Make no mistake. It was difficult. But he was a human being, and he's a person, and he was staying true to himself. And he had the gumph and the gumption and the ability to come and have an honest chat with me. And that comes back to the trust and the relationship thing, to say, "Look, have you got a minute?" And that was his values, and I respect him for that, and I will always respect him for that. And I think that was critically important. Yes, again, that goes back to succession planning and understanding what you want in that role. And you also went to the second person who just missed out and said, "Look, this has happened. Do you want the role?" There's also a management expectation of that person, because they think I'm second best.
Yeah.
So there's all these communication elements you need to think about, but it goes back to the fundamentals. That guy had his core values were being challenged slightly, which meant he couldn't perform in the job.
Yeah, and I think it makes a huge difference. And actually, I think there's a couple of companies now that offer leaving bonuses within the first 3 months. So if you join and you realise it's not right for you, they'll pay you, $2, $3, $4 to leave.
That's a change. That used to be your what do you call it, your provisional process, probation period. Yeah, see you later, thanks very much. But avoid the probation period. Just make sure the fit works. Just something else I want to bring up on that, actually, if we've got a minute, is like, you look at Stellwagen, just to think about that, the remote learning, how the dynamics. I mean, COVID has changed the world. Make no mistake. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. We too much students earlier on, but in the hard time they had. But if you look at, Jeff is in the US, I'm here in the UK. We have some joint ventures with people here in the UK and the Middle East, and then we've got, George is on the South Coast. And importantly, cultural, it has to be right, because you are not standing by the water cooler talking about Crystal Palace beat Aston Villa 4-1 the other day. Sorry to any Villa fans, but that's quite good. But that's the cultural fit. Or, hey, can you just have a quick look at this piece of work and tell me what it's about? Can I have your help? Those things don't happen as fluidly. And when you're hiring and you're in different geographies and different continents, it's really critical. But then also, how will you bring those cultures and people together so you feel part of a team? And that's, I think, harder now than it's ever been. And so you have to work harder to make part of a team. So, George comes up and stays with me up in Manchester, in Cheshire, once a month. I come down here, I go down to see him in Portsmouth and spend time with him down there. It's investing in time. But if you think about that, investment in time is so worth it. And the guys from Dubai come over, we go over there. I was out in Abu Dhabi before Christmas. I was out with Jeff in Boston before Christmas. Investing in time together and making sure that time is well spent and planned is important for the team as well. So those border issues that are, okay, we've got Zooms, but I'm an odd specimen really, and I just think face to face and flesh and talking to people eye to eye is very, very important. And I think it's really crucial. And whatever industry you're in, make sure that you have time with people and your team, and because that's the dynamic you want to foster.
I think, Matthew, we've taken up far too much of your time just looking at the clock, but I think that's a really good way of kind of ending that part of it. I think that's actually a really nice way of just kind of signing it off. And there is one last question, but I'm pretty sure that we know the answer to this based on the previous 45 minutes of conversation. But it is what I suppose is one piece of advice, both for those looking for jobs and for those organisations that are looking to hire. So one each. And what is that piece of advice that you give to somebody that's looking for a job, and what is that piece of advice for that hiring manager that's looking for the best person they can find?
Yeah, look, I think I've probably covered it a little bit here, and thanks for your time, Dan, and putting this in for people to listen to, and not just mine, but your previous episodes. There's some really good things you should do. So when you're asking about what you are trying to do, if you're trying to find a job, listen to things like this podcast, because you're not going to take all of it in, but there are, across your 40, 50 episodes, there are really good pieces of chunks of advice. And I would say, when you're looking at that and preparing and doing things like that, write those pieces of advice down on a book. Have a separate book from your day-to-day book about where you're going, because you'll forget.
Yep.
We're so blooming busy. We're bombarded with messages 24/7, whether it's adverts on TV or sport or music or whatever it is, or just being with family and friends. Write that stuff down and underline it and understand those bullet points. So when you're preparing, go flick that. Oh, God, I need to know that. Prepare well. Spend time. Don't get disheartened. Don't get distracted. Focus. Spend some focused time. Sit at a desk like it is a job and say, well, I'm going to spend the next few hours doing this, and organise your to-do list of what you want to do. Treat the job interview process like it is a job. So when you have that one chance to put the ball in the back of the net, you're ready. Be match ready.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. And again, listen to things like this. And then if you're hiring people and having interviews, I think it is, again, be true to your core values. Listen to those people, because they're on a journey as well as you. Understand what do they want out of this role? Where are they going? Because it's just as important to understand, because how you can impart your knowledge to them to help them grow in their process of work, because you're only going to get the best out of them if you take them on that journey with you.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. Yes, you need someone to fill a seat or a hole or a role or whatever it is in your organization, or a new role, but they're coming to you to help you take your journey on by understanding what they require, and is it right for them to be part of your team and for you. That's really important, because listen to where they want to go and what they want to do. And that's not just where do you want to be in 5 years' time. That's an old school question. And just listen to where they want to go and have an open conversation and a dialogue, and try and get away from that sort of hard element of an interview.
Yeah.
And make it a dialogue and a conversation and a chat. And I think that's my personality is just more like that softer approach, because you'll get more out of people that way and spend time with them.
Yeah. Right. That's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much
for
coming on the podcast. I think, as you said, there's lots of different bits and pieces that I'm hoping the listener can take home from this, and I think there are. So thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you too, and keep up all the other episodes. I'll be listening for tidbits and information I can take out of it. So thank you very much, Dan, yourself.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
What a fun and brilliant episode to record there. A great conversation with Matthew, someone who has been at the very top in the music, entertainment and sport game. So loads I think people can take away from that. And obviously, as always, if you've got any questions or comments, do leave a review. Let me know. If you liked it, please do share, subscribe, review the podcast, because it gets it to as many people as possible and helps as many people as possible, and that's all we are trying to do. So thanks again for listening. Any questions, like I said, in the comments, and I will see you for the next episode.